Organizational structure and control. All right, so I just want to go through it, and then you can always go and maybe do the tutorial sheet or that kind of thing. Because what happens, as I was telling you before, is that this section of the case analysis, a lot of students always, do this section wrong. All right, so let us talk about organizational structure and controls. So what is organizational structure? And it really specifies the firm's formal reporting relationships, their procedures, their controls, and authority and decision-making processes. So when a structure has elements in terms of its reporting relationships, procedures, etc., properly aligned with one another, the structure facilitates effective use of the firm's strategies. So a firm's structure specifies the work to be done and how to do it, given a firm's strategy or strategies. So how the firm is set up, the company is set up in terms of its hierarchy and that kind of thing, determines how they carry out their business level and their corporate level strategies and earn above average returns and all of those things. Organizational controls, on the other hand, is really the guide, is to really use to guide the use of strategy. It indicates how to compare actual results with expected results and suggest corrective actions to take when the difference is unacceptable. So say, for instance, when you do that section of the case analysis that you do your ratios, and when you interpret the ratios, you realize that, they're in too much debt. The debt ratio is too high, or, you're not getting enough return on investment and that kind of thing. Organizational control is supposed to be able to look at that and correct it. When fewer differences separate actual from expected outcomes, the organizational controls are more effective. Firms use both strategic controls and financial controls to support their strategies. So let us look a little bit at strategic controls. They are largely subjective criteria intended to verify that the firm is using appropriate strategies for the conditions in the external environment and the company's competitive advantages. Strategic controls are concerned with examining the fit between what the firm might do and what it can do. Strategic controls demand rich communication between managers responsible for using them to judge the firm's performance and those with primary responsibility for implementing the firm's strategies. So, they have things like the organizational balance scorecard and those things. When they set certain targets that they want to reach, then they have ways and means of how they are going to control them and monitor them and make sure that the organization really is maximizing their potential in a sense. And of course, it says that, you have to have good communication between managers, and you have to be able to judge the firm's performance, look at it objectively and that kind of thing. Financial control obviously is the criteria used to measure the firm's performance against previous established quantitative standard, right down to the money. So examples of financial controls are accounting-based measures such as return on investments, return on assets, market-based measures such as economic value added, and those things that, you look at some of those things when you're working out your ratios for that section of the case analysis. All right, so what is the relationship between strategy and structure? Strategy and structure have a reciprocal relationship. This relationship highlights the interconnectedness between strategy formulation and strategy implementation. In general, this reciprocal relationship finds structure flowing from or following selection of the firm's strategy. What is it that the firm wants to do? How are we going to compete in this product market? What are we doing in terms of corporate level strategies? Are we expanding? What kind of business we have? So the strategy and the structure is interrelated. So once in place, structure can influence current strategic actions as well as choices about future strategies. All right, so let us get into the actual structure of certain organizations. Now, the organizations usually start out small, like a simple structure, like as Jeff Bezos that started his business in his garage. Then he set up an office, so it was just him and a couple of persons that he employed. So it was just the manager and the people working for him. That is a simple structure. Functional structure now is when you start to have different managers and lower level persons, a supervisor, the clerk, and we have like a little hierarchy going on. That is the functional structure. And the multi-divisional structure now is when the company grow and have different divisions all over the place or maybe all over the world. So research suggests that most firms experience a certain pattern of relationships between strategy and structure. Chandler found that firms grow in somewhat predictable patterns. First, by volume, they're getting a lot of persons to buy their products. Then by geography, they're setting up different branches. Then integration, whether vertical or horizontal, they're expanding along their own value chain. And then finally, through product or business diversification, when they're going into other product markets or they're going into other businesses completely unrelated to their original business. All right, so I'll tell you a little bit about the simple structure just now, that it usually just start off with just the manager and just the persons that they work with on a daily basis. They don't really have any strict rules. It's not really that formal. The manager and the lower level staff just communicate directly, and because of that, and they're in pretty much the same space, then, you know, communication is very frequent and informal. The simple structure is matched with focused strategies and business level strategies. As firms implement these strategies, commonly compete by offering a single product line in a single geographic market. So you just have, like when we were talking about single and dominant business, you just have one single business you're producing or you're selling one product. Like Amazon, again, they started out just selling books when they were in the simple structure phase. So for examples, we have the local restaurant, repair businesses, and other specialized enterprises. That is what the simple structure is. The functional structure now, you have CEO, then you have other corporate staff like maybe a vice president, and then you have your middle managers like marketing manager, accounting manager, the HR manager, that kind of thing. So this structure allows for functional specialization. And this means that this set of persons that have the same skills work together in a particular department, and this facilitates active sharing of knowledge within each functional area. However, a functional orientation can negatively affect communication and coordination among those representing different organizational functions. That's basically saying that, you know, the different departments may not communicate well with each other. So the functional structure supports implementing business level strategies and some corporate level strategies. So you can have a single business, or you can have a dominant business that invests in other types of businesses. So you have the earning, they have this thing. Remember when we did the single business where they have a single that they're only doing that thing, or they have a dominant business where they do only one product or in one product market, but they might invest some money somewhere else. So they're having low levels of diversification. The functional structure works very well for that. And this is just a graph of how a functional structure can be used to implement a cost leadership strategy. Basically saying that, you know, say for instance, I'd say a Grace, for instance, have the president, then they have some centralized staff, means that these persons monitor the different departments. So that would be like the vice presidents, for instance. They have some centralized people there that manages engineering, marketing, operations, personnel, and accounting. That is primarily how the functional structure usually works, and that is very conducive to using a cost leadership strategy in a particular product market. We're understanding so far, guys?
Yes, Miss.
Anybody else? Anybody say no? All right, so the multi-divisional structure now is when you're getting really, really large. I call it also the M-form structure, and it consists of a corporate office and operating divisions, such as, so each operating division representing a separate business or profit center in which the top corporate officer delegates responsibility for day-to-day operations and business unit strategy to division managers. So we had used an example in a previous unit of General Electric that they have different divisions, but they still have their head office or the group of companies that manage. Or so for instance, when we had looked at like the capital market allocation, we see that the profit from the different companies come into a pool, and then the top managers or the centralized managers would decide how they're going to, allocate the funds. So we have the head office that manages the different divisions, whether across the country or across the world. So each division represents a distinct self-contained business with its own functional hierarchy. So you see like how we just discussed the functional hierarchy within the multi-divisional structure, they have 10 companies that operate under a functional structure. So M-Form is used to support implementation of related and unrelated diversification strategies and help firms successfully manage diversification's many demands. So remember, we talk about related like the vertical integration where you own several different companies along your value chain, and unrelated is when you own different companies in different industries. So the M-Form multi-divisional structure is like a corporation then, or the corporation functions and carry out their corporate level strategies. So the simple structure and the functional structure primarily used to carry out business level strategies. The functional structure can use for corporate as well, but the multi-division is primarily on how to carry out the corporate level strategies. So we see a functional structure. We may have the president and some staff. We may have a research and development. Then we have marketing. Then we have new product operations, but this is just like the head office. And then we have different companies within this. So this is just the head office staff, and it looks very functional here, but beneath it, they also have a lot of different companies. All right, so let us look at some matches now between business level strategies and the functional structure, which is a lot of what this, we kind of really focus on the functional structure because it is mostly used, because a lot of the companies within a multi-divisional structure actually use the functional structure within the individual companies. All right, so firms use different forms of the functional organizational structure to support implementing the cost leadership differentiation and integrated cost leadership differentiation strategies. The differences in these forms are accounted for primarily by different uses of three important structural characteristics. First, we have specialization, which is concerned with the type and number of jobs required to complete that marketing department and this other department and that kind of thing. Centralization now is the degree to which decision-making authority is retained at higher managerial levels, and then formalization now is the degree to which formal rules and procedures govern work. And these things are characteristic of the functional structure. So like maybe when you are done intro to management or other courses, we would look at how scientific theory of management and that kind of thing talk about specialization and centralization and formalization, or a bureaucratic organization. This is kind of related to that. Firms using the cost leadership strategy sell large quantities of standardized products to an industry's typical customer. So we had discussed that already when we did business level strategy. So simple reporting relationships are there. There are few layers in the decision-making and authority structure and a centralized corporate staff. And a strong focus is on process improvement, because when you're improving your process, you're cutting costs through the manufacturing function rather than the development of new products. So usually when they're in the cost leadership, you're not really looking at developing new products. You're focusing on how you can tighten up things within the organizational structure, your processes and that kind of thing, so that you can cut costs. Emphasizing product research and development characterize the cost leadership form of the functional structure. Additionally, firms using the differentiated strategy now produce products customers perceive as being different in ways that create value for them, kind of unique. So with this strategy, the firms want to sell non-standardized products to customers with unique needs. Now, relatively complex and flexible reporting relationships are inherent in the functional structure looking at differentiation. There's a frequent use of cross-functional product development teams and a strong focus on marketing and product R&D rather than manufacturing and process R&D. So while the cost leadership strategy, we now focus on how to tighten up things within the organization, the differentiation strategy is looking primarily at research and development, improving the product, making it more unique, because the cost of the product from their customer that the customer is going to pay is not a big issue. So from this structure emerges a development-oriented culture in which employees try to find ways to further differentiate current products and to develop new, highly differentiated products. So for specialization, cost leadership is high, differentiation is low, because we're specializing in a particular product or business area. For centralization, decisions are made at the top, and when it is flexible, decision making is decentralized. Persons in the different divisions, or I shouldn't say divisions, different departments within the functional structure, decision making is centralized. They are able to make certain decisions. And formalization, no, we're talking about hierarchy, where the focus is on process or keeping costs low, while for differentiation, the focus is on innovation and improving things. Okay, so is this the last one? I don't know. Firms using now the integrated cost leadership and differentiation strategy while in the functional structure. Now they sell products that create value because of their relatively low cost and reasonable sources of differentiation. They have an effective use of the integrated strategy, and it depends on the firm's successful combination of activities intended to reduce costs with activities intended to create additional differentiation features. And if you remember when we did this, we talk about the balance between, the cost and the differentiation and combining them. The integrated form of the functional structure must have decision-making patterns that are partially centralized and partially decentralized. Because when you're focusing on innovation, as we see with the differentiation, we're going to management for every single decision. We want to be creative and have the autonomy to make certain decisions. Say, for instance, buy certain kind of specialized materials and that kind of thing. All you do, give me a budget and I go buy what I want. But at the same time, there's another set of persons that stringent with the money and it need to be approved from the top. So additionally, jobs are semi-specialized, and rules and procedures call for some formal and some informal job behavior. So we see here that we are merging the characteristics of the cost leadership in our functional structure and the differentiation in our functional structure. And if you remember, when we talk about some of the risks associated with the integrated strategies, and we're saying that we can have this stuck in the middle thing where we're not focusing on one enough, that it is not cheap enough and it is not differentiated enough. Right. All right. So that was a mouthful on the functional structure. So what I want you to get from that is that the functional, how I just described how the functional structure carries out the cost leadership strategies, how it carries out the differentiation strategies, and how it carries out the integrated strategy. Did we look at the focus? I think we did. I don't remember. Anyway, matches between corporate level strategies and now on the multi-divisional structure. The firm's level of diversification is a function of decisions about the number and type of businesses in which it will compete, as well as how it will manage the business. So geared to managing individual organizational functions, it increasing diversification. Let me read that again. Geared to managing individual and organizational functions, increasing diversification eventually creates information processing, coordination, and control problems that the functional structure cannot handle. And what that is saying is that you have the different companies And if you were going to operate under just a functional structure where the hierarchy is going to be so high that when you reach down to the bottom, you're just not going to know what is happening. The coordination and the control are going to get out of hand. So the regular functional structure for the complete multi-divisional structure would not work. Thus, using a diversification strategy requires the firm to change from the functional structure to the multi-divisional structure to develop an appropriate strategy structure match. If you don't understand, tell me now. So let me go back to this slide. You will notice here that the multi-divisional structure, it have a cooperative form, a strategic business unit form, and a competitive form. So we're going to look at those. We soon finish. So the cooperative form now, using the cooperative form of the multi-divisional structure to implement the related constrained strategy. Now remember, the related constrained is when you have similar business or business that you can share activities and transfer core competencies between them because they complement each other. They are in the same product market and that kind of thing. So the cooperative form is an M-form structure in which horizontal integration is used to bring about interdivisional cooperation. Divisions in a firm using the related constrained diversification strategy commonly are formed around products or markets or both. Just as I was saying, you know, like the vertical integration, for instance. The cooperative structure uses different characteristics of structure. They use centralization, standardization, and formalization, which we had discussed before, as integrating mechanisms to facilitate interdivisional cooperation. So each company can coordinate and talk to each other, and decision making can come together for all the different companies within the cooperative form. Frequent direct contact between division managers, another integrating mechanism, encourages and supports cooperation and the sharing of competencies or resources that can be used to create new advantages. So for instance, again, the vertical integration strategy, where you have your own different companies along the same value chain. You can coordinate activities, you can share competencies, share activities, I should say, transfer competencies, and there is so much similarity of what is going on, or one company depend on the other. So that is why it is a cooperative form of the multi-divisional structure. You have different companies, but they cooperate with each other, they work well together because the companies complement each other. All right, so this is a little graphic that is showing that, yes, you have some amount of centralization where you have a president and you have different units, but you have different divisions within them that deal with different parts of the company. Strategic business units now. This is pretty simple. So how do we use the strategic business unit form of the multi-division structure to implement the related link strategy? So if you remember now, we said that the related link is when company A is sharing activities with company B, B is sharing with C, but C is not sharing anything with A. So you have a set of companies, but all of them are not related. Some of them are related, some of them are not. So the strategic business unit form is an M-form structure consisting of 3 levels: corporate headquarters, strategic business units, and SBU divisions. The SBU structure is used by large firms and can be complex, given associated organization size and product and market diversity. Now, the divisions within each SBU are related in terms of shared products or markets or both, but the divisions in the SBU have little in common with the divisions in the other SBUs, which is what I was just explaining about the company A and the company B. Divisions within each SBU share product or market competencies to develop economies of scope and possibly economies of scale. So even if I keep saying SBU is the strategic business unit, is like me saying company A or company B. It's the same thing. All right, so this is the related link. So we have three, so if you notice where it says strategic business unit, the first one, it has three divisions beneath it that are related. Then second one have three divisions that are related, and then the third one. But the three of them, the three strategic business units, are not necessarily related. They're not sharing anything. And the last one now is the competitive form. So the competitive form of the M-form structure characterized by complete interdependence among the firm's divisions, which compete for corporate resources. So firms using the unrelated diversification strategy now want to create value through efficient internal capital market allocations or by restructuring, buying and selling businesses. The competitive form of the multidivisional structure supports implementation of this strategy. So the companies within, so say for instance, the same General Electric example that I had used, they're basically, in a sense, competing for the overall resources of the company. They want more money to be allocated to research and development, for instance, and they want to pay a higher dividends on their stock and that kind of thing, because all is that basically the companies within the group of companies kind of competing with each other, but not in the product market, you know, within the company itself. So unlike the divisions included in the cooperative structure, divisions that are a part of the competitive structure do not share common corporate strengths because strengths are not shared. Integrating devices are not developed for use by the divisions included in the competitive structure. And a competitive structure would look like this. Same, pretty much overall the M form. So, yeah. All right, so just a little recap. We have, over here, we have the structural characteristics, centralization of operations, use of integration mechanisms, divisional performance appraisal, divisional incentive compensation, and then different forms, because all of this is related to the M form, the types. So we have a cooperative where it is centralized at the corporate office. They extensively integrate. They emphasize subjective criteria in terms of performance, or the divisional performance appraisal, not individual now. And they are linked to overall corporate performance when you're in the cooperative. So they look at all the companies and how they perform and not necessarily look at them individually. And then the SBU M form now, partially centralized, moderate integration, divisional performance is a mixture of subjective and objective criteria, both strategic and financial. And then the divisional incentive compensation is mixed linkage to corporate, SBU, and divisional performance. So it is different then. Compensation is different for the different areas. And the competitive now, decentralized to the different divisions. There is no integration at all, and the divisional performance appraisal look at just financial criteria, and the incentive compensation is linked to divisional performance, and they are not all together. Yes, so that's pretty much it for the organizational structure. And I wanted you to understand it so that when you look at your case that you are analyzing, you can say that, okay, this particular company uses a functional structure because it is a company that is operating on its own in terms of they don't have other companies it's not a group of companies, it's a single company. They're using the cost leadership strategy and that kind of thing. Or if it is a multi-divisional structure, I want you to go down and tell me whether it is cooperative, whether it is a SBU M form, or whether it is a competitive form. So you'll need to do some additional reading now outside of this to see exactly, or to match exactly what kind of structure the company that you are analyzing is using, and then you just describe it. It's not hard. It might seem a little out there, because maybe for some of you it's the first time you are being introduced to the M-form structure in particular and looking at the different types. So yeah, I just wanted to go through this, and I'm just going to download this tomorrow and take off the part with the lecture and repost it, because I realized that I don't have a lecture for this particular topic. All right, so how we do? What we think? What we thinking?
So, Miss, we did a good deal of work tonight. A lot to really take in a given night. Just watch over the tutorial again to really grasp everything.
Yes, excellent.